Layla Roberts, my partner in crime on this event, I think, and have her introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Senator McGuire, for spearheading this. I'm coming to you from the room in my house that's closest to the router, just in case. So my name is Layla Roberts, and I am director of the North Coast Small Business Development Center. Buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Layla Roberts y estoy la directora del Centro para el Desarrollo de Pequeñas Empresas en el Costa del Norte. And I'm coming to you from sacred, unceded Wiyot lands. I jumped at the opportunity to introduce our next keynote speaker. Tara Lynn Gray is director of the California Office of the Small Business Advocate, OSBA, and that operates within the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. So if you ever heard the acronym GoBiz, that's it. Ms. Gray is focused on further developing the state's small business ecosystem and ensuring that equity is front and center as she administers the small business programs that she's responsible for. She is a visionary. It's breaking new ground in non-traditional spaces. She is not afraid to ask the hard questions and engage in serious conversations to bring the governor's vision of a California for all to fruition. And most recently, and I hope she might reflect on this a little bit, Governor Newsom just issued an executive order directing all state agencies and departments to take additional actions to embed equity analysis and considerations in their mission, policies, and practices. And we've just established the state's first Racial Equity Commission. And I just want to add, I love that Tara Lynn Gray comes from the world that she is determined to shape. She's a business owner in her own right, CEO of Yadari Enterprises, a management consulting firm. She's president and CEO of the Fresno Metro Black Chamber of Commerce. She has served as a small business counselor with a Northern California Small Business Development Centers. She's taught small business classes, led a youth entrepreneurship program for 9 years with the California Black Chamber. I am so thrilled and so honored to welcome you virtually, Tara Lynn Gray. Welcome to the Redwood Coast.
Mil gracias, Layla. Greatly appreciated. Wow. Can I just start by saying good job, Redwood Coast. I am so happy to be able to represent my office at this particular event, and I really appreciate being included in such a fabulous lineup. What a great panel that was before. And I love the line, disrupt your communities and organize. I think that is the advice that many of us need to be following. And I have to also say that my NorCal regional advisor told me about this event last year, and I thought back then, what a great way to bridge so many miles of our great state and support real collaboration across this important and beautiful region. So when Mayor Seaman invited me to be here, I was really, really, really happy to say yes. So again, my name is Tara Lynn Gray, and I am the director of the Office of the Small Business Advocate. And there is so much work to be done in that office that I have put my business on hold, and there is someone else running the chamber now. So I have all of my attention focused on California's 4.2 million small businesses. I want to start really by explaining a little bit about my office and our mission before I move into the rest of my message. Our office really has 4 distinct priorities. The first priority is to provide access to resources, to make sure that small businesses in our state have the access to the resources they need to start their business, to grow their business, and to manage their business. And then second, as the name implies, we are an advocate, and we do our best to really elevate the voice of small businesses, to really understand the impacts of legislation, programs on small businesses, and to advocate for those that might not have their voice in a position to be heard. Thirdly, we are dedicated to advancing economic resilience. And we know in California that we have many threats to our economic situation, as we have all experienced the last few years, and as we continue to experience given the climate change impacts. And then lastly, because we do not want disadvantage to continue as it has historically based on zip code, race, and gender, we work to create an ecosystem that advances economic mobility through small business ownership. You know, our office really got a big spotlight when COVID-19 hit and the governor approved $4 billion plus in funding for direct relief grants. And I posit that that was perhaps the biggest outreach effort ever in our organization. And we know for certain it was the biggest such effort in the country. Last year, my office stood up 8 programs. And this year, it looks like our number's going to go to 15. And every single one of those programs, when we look under the hood, is about one thing, and that's about equitable economic recovery. Those programs are about manifesting the governor's vision of a California for all. And so let's talk about why small businesses are so key to that goal. I know that I might be biased here, but I'm pretty sure that it's true that small businesses are the key to an equitable economic recovery. We lead in employment, which is key to equitable economic recovery. The California economy depends on small business success. And because of California's resources, talent, and dominance in technology and other industries, it's arguably the best place to start a business. As I said a moment ago, there are 4.2 million small businesses in the state, and those businesses contribute nearly half of our workforce and act as a natural training ground for entry-level jobs. So here are a couple of stats that are a little less well-known. According to SBA data, California ranks #1 on the list of largest number of small businesses. And in fact, we have 36% more small businesses than the next state on the list, which is Texas, if you care. And nearly 45% of those businesses have owners who are Hispanic or racial minorities. Only Hawaii and the territories have higher percentages of diverse ownership. And this means that California has the largest and most diverse small business sector in the country. And we could put a period there, a full stop, the largest. What that means is economic development strategies for all of our regions must include policy programs and processes to build a small business support ecosystem that can help underserved business communities. And let's talk about underserved for a moment. Want you to know what I mean by underserved. My office uses the definition underserved businesses are owned by women, minorities, people of color, veterans, and or those that are operating in low wealth, rural, and disaster impacted communities. Now, I'm not an expert on your region, so I don't dare to educate you about your region, that's for sure. But when I asked my regional advisor to give me her impression and understanding of the Redwood Coast, she described to me a region where the minority owned business rate is about 14 to 19%, and it's about 39% for San Francisco, where there are overwhelming majority of all businesses in this region have 9 or fewer employees. That's significant. Where the poverty rate runs around at 17, 18%. And when we compare that to San Francisco, it's about 10%. And this year, just talking about 2022 only, the SBA is listing Humboldt and Del Norte as contiguous counties in the McKinney fire, which was declared disaster CA 00362. I say all of that to say that my office has a very real interest in working with practitioners in the Redwood Coast, to continue building a robust small business support ecosystem. We want to continue to support equitable economic recovery because they go together, kind of like peanut butter and jelly. And anybody who knows me really well knows I'm really serious about my peanut butter. So I'm equally as serious about equitable economic recovery. On this front, the signature program of our office at CalOSBA is the Technical Assistance Program, which provides funding to small business technical assistance centers, including SBDCs and nonprofits. And I'm told that a Q&A session will be facilitated by Layla Roberts of the North Coast SBDC, significant partner to us. And I might add that the SBDCs are the biggest and the baddest of all the technical assistance providers across the state. And that's really what we're focusing on here. And I have to say, as a longtime technical assistance practitioner, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where our small businesses get the help that they need. It's where they get access to resources. It oftentimes is where they get the pep talk that helps them fight another day. And this year, I'm excited to tell you that Governor Newsom made this technical assistance program. The funding is now permanent and increased the amount of statewide funding from the 17 million it's been during its pilot stage to 23 million. And we have another 8 million for women's business centers. So this is a significant investment in the ecosystem and the organizations that are providing the much needed on the ground support. And that's huge progress on this front, and really due to the quantified successes of SBDC directors like Layla over the course of the 4-year pilot program. So Layla, I want to give a special shout out to you. Hats off to you and your team. I can't tell you how proud I am of being able to support the work of boots on the ground, boots like the ones worn by you and your team. You are the practitioners that are rolling up your sleeves and giving it all you've got to uplift others. And that's what it takes. So I'm honored to represent a network of 91 small business centers across the state and to host a unified platform through the CalOSBA website that connects small business owners with the services you all provide. Having said that, my job in fact, our job together really is to identify gaps in that ecosystem and to try to fill them. So let's for a minute talk about a gap that I see that isn't being addressed yet. I know that you all are talking about infrastructure issues, both hard and soft today. And one of the soft infrastructure gaps that I see is a frictionless way of creating and sharing profile information about our small businesses in a way that protects their financial privacy, but also makes it easier for them to get the services provided by the ecosystem. I'm really thinking about figuring out how to create access to the exact right kind of technical assistance they need at the exact moment they need it. So imagine with me going forward, um, and further than wraparound business development services, as important as they are. And let's think for a moment about gaps that were recently uncovered: legal support, accounting and compliance, contracting support for businesses who want to get at one of the biggest markets in the state which is state government contracts. And most of all, I'm thinking about matching small businesses with the lender most likely to be able to say yes, and then deliver on that yes. So I'm imagining using technology, carefully crafted profile data, and the kind of heuristics that somehow let your browser, know that you're in the market for dog food or hairspray or whatever before you even know it yourself. I don't quite understand the magic behind that, but I know there is a science to that. And I imagine that we could use that science and that we could use that technology to match businesses with business support services, because I frankly don't see the need for those supportive services declining anytime in the future. And I frankly think that this kind of platform is within our reach, mostly because we're seeing it so deeply embedded in existing technology and deeply penetrated in other marketplaces. I think that even the government could figure out how to use it. So if this were an in-person event, I would be, looking for laughs right here about even the government being able to figure out how to use it. But since we're virtual, I will keep it moving. But now I want to just, imagine that we take that idea one step further and throw out an idea that I've been kind of kicking around with my team and hoping to hear what you think about it during the Q&A. I think about this idea about no wrong door. And it's the idea that businesses could build these profiles, access business services in the same way that individuals have medical profiles that can be shared from one provider to the next, of course, with all of the associated security and levels on a need-to-know basis. And every encounter with a specific agency or department points to the ecosystem and the resources available to that small business. So just think about it in terms of no matter how you arrive at the door of a specific agency, you get a warm handoff to where you're supposed to be. And frankly, I envision more than a warm handoff. I envision a special door-to-door delivery. with all of the associated information and or concerns if they are applicable. And so I want to be clear this morning, this is not an announcement of any kind. This is really me playing the role of futurist here. And since we're talking about infrastructure, both soft and hard, bouncing ideas off of audiences like yours, the folks that are in community, to really look at a better way to provide the services, to create the necessary infrastructure to deliver what our communities need. So we want to know what resonates out there in your communities. And if any of you are wondering, how did I get here? One of the significant impacts that I saw after COVID-19, and I'm sure others did too, it wasn't very much talked about at the time, but we're learning more and more about it as we debrief and as we look at what transpired. But there frankly was kind of an application fatigue for small businesses. Getting at the available relief resources was just as exhausting as dealing with the issues themselves. And the businesses that had the most resources, right? The accountants, the lawyers, the managers, ended up being able to access the most resources. And to me, that's kind of opposite of equitable, and thinking that some of you might agree. So let's say that government agencies and departments like mine, other departments like Secretary of State, like all the hundreds of agencies with procurement contracts, we're able to share information about our small businesses, from basic profile information like operating address and ownership structure, et cetera, but also information about their operations, what they sell, where they sell it, their labor and management capacity, access to working capital, plus the triage experts, right? How much more efficient could we be if we, government agencies, were able to plug into this kind of data infrastructure for the benefit of our small businesses? How much faster could we deliver services if we could identify the candidates for those services at the time we're frankly standing up programs? I'll admit that there's an element of a pipe dream here. And I do want to acknowledge that. But I wanted to take a moment to dream big with you while we're talking about equitable economic recovery, while we're talking about infrastructure, and while we're talking about a region that doesn't have all the built-in resources that some of our other larger regions like the Bay Area or LA, a region where geographical isolation is a factor in daily business operations. You know, it's the role of my office to figure out how to deliver to rural and to low wealth communities. And I think the fact that the Redwood Coast is such a beautiful place and that so many Californians have enjoyed wonderful vacations up there may obscure the challenges facing your region. And, you know, we all remember our postcards, but don't think enough about your realities. So I want to communicate that my office is tracking your efforts and wants to work with you. And in that spirit and on that note, I want to make sure to invite you to our upcoming event. My team has prepared a virtual open house so that the whole state can meet our team, which has grown from 5 to 19, and learn more about our programs and our initiatives and give voice to those things that we need to continue to pay attention to. It will be on October 6th at 10 a.m. And if you want to register, all you have to do is visit the registration link. And I think Claire can drop that in the chat for us. So I won't carry on much longer, but I do want to close by saying thank you for your time. Thank you for the honor of addressing you today. And please do drop some questions at the Q&A. And most of all, feel free to contact your regional advisor, Claire Whitmer, excuse me, Claire. And I think she'll put her email in the chat as well. Layla, I think I turn it back over to you.
Woo, thank you, Tara Lynn Gray. That was rich, and it was challenging, and I really enjoy this pipe dream idea. I'm none of us would ever have been an entrepreneur if we didn't subscribe to the idea that pipe dreams can become real, right? I would love to pause, invite you all to pop your comments and your questions in the chat if you have a direct response to Tara Lynn Gray's provocative question: what if you didn't have to hunt for your service, but rather had a one-stop shop as a business owner? And I am going to note, by the way, I saw a comment from someone who was mentioning it. Oh, this was you, Susan. This was you. We're seeing a lot of state and business organizations that recommend funding organizations are defaulting to fintech, which is, the financial technology lenders, the folks who can process transactions fast and virtually, but don't necessarily have local connections. And Susan, I would echo that there's real value in working on making local referrals first, because West Company, the Lake EDC that provides small business development services in Lake County, North Coast SBDC providing services in Del Norte and Humboldt County, are local. We are thinking of ourselves as a public good. And, this morning I was getting texts from our clients saying, hey, I want to connect with my business advisor. Hey, I have a question about a bookkeeper. So those relationships, I think, are really foundational to anything else that a small business owner can access across the full spectrum of valuable government services. I'm going to keep scanning for questions. Please keep your eye on the chat for other resources, by the way. There are lots of good events and websites popping up. Our ally, Greg Foster, with the Redwood Region Economic Development Commission, a Joint Powers Authority economic development lender and strategist for Humboldt County, is noting that there is particular value in the lending, servicing, and support post-loan in making sure that small business owners are connected to services. I am going to add something personally here, Tara Lynn. Oh, are you speaking? It looks like you're on mute, but I hope you're not.
I am not on mute.
Good.
I was just waiting for the right place to jump in, because you actually hit two things that excite me. The first one about using your local lender, true, agreed, but I want to say local first, period, right? That ecosystems, and I use that word a lot because it implies and states interdependence. And I think that that's what we have to exploit, take advantage of, use to the best of our ability in our local communities. And that is the interdependence, that we don't gain success in a community on our own. The small business doesn't get success without the local support that they get through their SBDC or technical assistance provider. They don't get a loan unless they, start with their local folks first who know the climate in which they are operating. And a fintech lender does not necessarily do that. I think there is a place for all in the ecosystem, but I say to folks, first stop ought to be local. You got to have something in common with the folks that you endeavor to do business with. Second thing that you said is technical assistance, or that the other person, I'm sorry, put in the chat. Post loan technical assistance is critical. I've always said that the technical assistance is perhaps more important than the financing, because it's the technical assistance that forces the small business to get in order exactly what they want to do with the financing that they think that they need. So underscore on the post loan technical assistance to make sure that once that money is received, that it is spent properly, that it is accounted for, that it is tracked, that that the systems and the procedures in the back office are in place to make sure that if there comes an event in the future, that small business has the ability to get resources because they've handled the resources they had at the outset properly.
You're so right. One of the things that I say during our workshops is it can be very lonely to be an entrepreneur on your own. No reason to do it independently. I was wondering, Cyril, if you were going to mention this. Our Cal Poly Humboldt Academic and Public Libraries chief is really interested in collaborating to create library services, both at the university level, the community college level, and the county level, that will serve as a sort of a home for entrepreneurs looking for information, coming to events, trying to tap resources. And Cyril, I will add that tying this back to Tarlyn Gray's provocative question, one of the things that we are always striving for, and that I know that Marianne Petrillo in Mendocino and Lake is also striving for, is to be available wherever business owners are, whether it's walking in the door at the county or the city planning commission to figure out what the heck's going on with their business license or their zoning requirements. Making sure that every chamber knows how to essentially present us as a collective service for their chamber members. Of course, with the county and city economic development departments, making sure that we know what their visionary strategies are so that we can plan to provide programs that will allow our local entrepreneurs and business owners to take advantage of those. My goodness. For example, this multi-million-dollar offshore wind project coming to just off the bay here. We are determined to make sure that our small business owners participate actively in that value chain. So what I'm thinking, Tarlyn, is people walking in the door and knowing how to get help wherever they happen to be, whether it's their accountant's office or a local government agency. Mm-hmm. So that's not too huge of a challenge, right? We could build a system that would accommodate that.
Well, and I think it is making sure that there are point people in the communities that are pulling down the information. We process and put out a tremendous amount of information at the state. And I cannot tell you how many times I hear people say, oh, I didn't know about that, or I didn't know about that. And so we've got to make sure it's incumbent upon us to make sure that in our communities that we have point people. All they do is go get that information and bring it back. And big projects like that, we've got to make sure that we have small business participation. We've got to make sure that there is adequate representation from all of the communities, surrounding communities. I sit on a procurement work group, and we met yesterday, and I can tell you that this is top of mind for many different organizations and departments across the government. Really figuring out how we crack the nut for procurement for small businesses. How do we approach procurement differently? How do we get creative about the way procurements are set up to make sure that our small businesses have an equitable shot at getting that work?
I had to ask for permission to unmute. Oh, please, may I? I love this. I love that you're helping us to weave together the many services that exist. If any of you listening haven't caught this yet, scan through the chat and find the contact information for the Northern California Procurement Technical Assistance Center. Their leader, James Forrest, is on this summit Zoom. And we cross-refer all the time when a client is getting to the point where they are scaled up enough that they want to go for those government contracts. It can be a significant blessing, especially in a rural community, to make sure that our small business owners can tap both local and state and county and federal government contracts, but it takes a little bit of support and preparation. So James is your guy. I also want to note, I'm so glad you're here. We've got Eva Shepard-Nickel, who is running the North States iHub in Innovation program. And she and I owe you a return email, Eva. We've been talking about ways to support off-the-wall innovations in all of our communities in a way that takes the blessing of Ms. Gray's technical assistance program funding and funding for capital infusion, and pairs it up with economic opportunities that are coming to our region: offshore wind, broadband, our fish farm, and more. So I'm going to pause for a moment, and I just want to say one more thing, Tara Lynn, that I would love to hear your reflections on, which is, and I'm seeing it here too, bubbling up in the chat. Every single county and region that you are holding in care has stuff going on. And I find myself wondering, what is the most beautiful way and the most effective way that we can feed folks at the Sacramento level and the regional level what our greatest hopes and foci are? For example, I cannot begin to say how grateful I am that the Governor's Office of Business Development Technical Assistance Expansion Program funding from the way back paid for the complete translation of all of our workshop materials into Spanish, helped us to create our very first robust business succession program to make sure that our Main Street businesses that were still viable were transferring into new hands and not leaving us with what I call the Main Street gap teeth. You funded the program that allowed us to relaunch technical assistance for employee-owned enterprises. And we're seeing some of our region's first cooperatives, new cooperatives in 32 years because of that. We would love to celebrate that and share that and see if it can be cross-pollinated. What do you think?
Wow, that was a mouthful, Layla. First of all, thank you for the thank you. This is the power of the California network. We do not, my office, we don't have enough staff. We do not provide direct services, but we darn sure know how to leverage. And I think that's what you just got done describing. We want to continue investing in and funding SBDCs and private technical assistance centers and PTACs, and because that is the best way. Having been a small business owner myself, I used to always say, I've got enough contacts. I want contracts. I know everybody. I'm a popular lady, but I need contracts. And why? Because contracts are the organic way to grow a business. And I think that how you all help us to help you is to continue bringing that feedback. Leverage your advisors. They have my direct ear. We work and we do roundtables and we do problem solving and collaborate to figure out who needs what where. We're super excited about what the governor and the legislature have allowed us to do through last year's budget items and this year's budget items. I've never seen in my 25 years of experience in this area, I've never seen this level of commitment to small business. And the commitment to small business means honoring and committing further to partners like you, to partners like Eva, to standing up programs that deliver at the local level. And that's what we care about. You know, my staff will tell you, I want to see the outcomes, right? I don't want shiny. I want to see the outcomes. I want to see what business got what. I want to see. In fact, one of the programs I love is a program in Southern California that when they take their small businesses through a specific training program, at the end, they march them to their first sale. They do not let go of them until they've made their first sale. That's an outcome that can literally be taken to the bank. And so just know that we are trying to support a system, improve on a system that cannot work without local partners like you.
Thank you for the thanks. We're in it together. I know that there are business owners and entrepreneurs on the Zoom with us, and I'm going to call on you folks. I think that this is a great opportunity for you to offer a reflection or ask a question to someone who's listening. And while we're waiting for that, I wanted to lift up a question in the chat. Lindsay Jones makes a very good point. I think we're all understaffed, or we're all, I should say, lean staffed. She notes, for example, funding that comes in for economic development in Willow Creek, California, which is in eastern Humboldt, about an hour and 15 minutes east of where I'm sitting on the coast. She says the funding is good, but it's not enough to even have a part-time employee. So they struggle to bring information back and to influence what's happening with the funding that comes to them because of the infrastructure needs at the economic development level. And I think we've seen that as well, trying to take advantage of state funding opportunities. It was my honor to work from 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. many nights during the pandemic, making sure that our clients had information. And, if we had more staff, we would have been able to spread it more broadly. So let's see. Okay, Kay Wiley notes, many projects are funded. I'm not sure I understand it, but the lack of administration is an issue with state and federal projects. I think we're talking also about coordination and information sharing. This is a challenging question, but I trust you, Tara, to wrestle with it. When we want to, in smaller rural communities, make sure that we are competing effectively, both to tap funds and to deliver services with relatively smaller economic development and business development infrastructures. Do you have guidance or reflections for us on that?
Yeah, and operative word, compete, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's call a spade, right? Rural areas are disadvantaged. They don't have the population. They don't get the same attention, frankly. And I hope I don't get in trouble for saying that.
Well, back
But
to
I'm calling it as I see it, not only from this seat, but I spent the last 4 years working in the Central Valley in the heart of the state, which produces 40% of the fruits and nuts that this country consumes, while the people that are producing that food have children that go to bed hungry at night. I understand rural disadvantage better than I ever thought I would. I am the product of two beautiful parents who grew up in that Central Valley, um, who picked cotton and yes, and left the fields of Bakersfield to pursue college educations and landed in the Bay Area. Mom went to UC Berkeley, dad to San Francisco State. But after they graduated, landed in the Bay Area because they swore that they wanted something different for their children. And it wasn't until I only share all of this to say, it wasn't until I went back to the Central Valley to take my previous assignment that I really understood what my parents were leaving, what my parents saw as a significant disadvantage, and that the only way they could overcome it was to do two things: leave it, and the second to get an education. So it is about capacity. It is about resources. It is about competing. And I think one of the reasons why the broadband, excuse me, one of the reasons why the broadband conversation is so critical is because with our increasingly digital world, that competitive edge is gonna have to be seen through technology. Without it, our rural regions aren't gonna get it. They're just not. And so speaking to, how do you leverage the resources you have? How do you pay for staff? I say you do what was said at the outset when I came on. You disrupt, you advocate for your community. And I don't mean that as just a slogan or just to repeat what was already said. I sincerely believe that the digital divide must be conquered and that rural areas have got to get the same speed and quality. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to bear that burden, to bear that cost. And I think that you all will have to be creative as a part of that disruptive process to figure out how to do that. Now, on the communication side, on the idea sharing, on the collaboration, we want to hear from you. That is where you leverage Claire, and that is where you bring your ideas to the forefront. I can't make any promises. I don't control the legislature. I don't control the budget. So I can't promise how it gets done. But I can promise that when good ideas come to us, they will not die in our department, that we will do everything that we can do to elevate the voice of the regions that we serve.
I so appreciate that, Claire. Tara, sorry, I was looking at Claire's comment. Tara Lynn, I just wanted to reaffirm what you've just said and to say that we have seen that at work. We have seen that when we have a question and we go to Claire or to someone else on your team, we get what we need, even if it's just a very frank, well, this is how it works and this is how it doesn't work. So thank you for the offer, and I can tell it's legit.
Thank you.
So, we're staying on the capacity issue, but I want to go back to the equity question a little bit because somebody posed a question that I really enjoyed and that I think can be generative. It's very simply, what are the best practices for reaching communities with a language other than English? And there is so much underneath that. You want to take that one?
Absolutely. Because I'm proud to say that during the Small Business COVID Relief Grant outreach and engagement process, through our network of partners, we were able to serve small businesses in more than 40 languages. And I will say that is a commitment that I see as absolutely necessary, not only for that program, but for other programs. We, for the first time this year in our TAP RFP, embedded an equity question and exercise in the proposal because we frankly are looking for new ideas from our partners and looking to see how they are advancing equity in their regions and what equity means to them. So I think it is safe to say, even prior to the governor's executive order on equity, that it is something that is very important to me and to my team. But now that we have an executive order, we now have the authority to do additional things to create equity. And I can assure you that language access is one of them. It is a subject that I brought up to my team. I currently have on my team 2 native Spanish speakers and 1 learned Spanish speaker, and I do my best with my broken Spanish. In terms of reaching our Latino population, we are trying to meet some of those needs natively in our own department. And then, of course, we leverage our other partners in the ecosystem to make sure that in-language services are indeed being provided. And I'm proud to say that we have quite a few partners that take language access and providing services to our immigrant communities very, very significant and important priorities for them as well. So stay tuned. You will continue to see more language access from us. What we're dealing with on our end is the how, because we don't internally have the resources to do that. So we have to continue to look for ways to leverage our network to accomplish our end goal.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very helpful to hear. And I'll take your final point and add to it by offering back to the person who posed this question in the first place, absolutely about language, also about channels, and I'll say more about that, and then third, and perhaps most important, about culture.
Mm-hmm.
So, having workshop materials translated into at least Spanish from English and having a simultaneous interpreter on staff to support counseling and training sessions is the bare minimum. One of the things that I'm conscious of is that people who are Hispanohablante or more comfortable in Hmong or more comfortable in Mandarin or Cantonese are also going to be accessing information using different channels. So we need to be prepared for more than just the website and Facebook, but how are we getting information out by cell phone and text? How are we making sure that we're visible where people are already looking? It's basic customer service, customer experience design.
Yes.
And then finally, there's an aspect of culture that I think gets lost sometimes unless you are trying to come face to face with someone who is perhaps more comfortable in another language and also dealing with the deeper divide of how do I connect with these people I need services from? It's not just the language, it's the assumptions that underlie it. So we had a micro business owner in a town south of us who was about to be driven out of business because he was Spanish speaking. and could not figure out how to get a business license. He was about to be shut down, and he was about to stop being able to feed his family for the rest of the season. And what had to happen was not just, "Sí, señor, this is how you complete the business license application," but no, we're going to send someone down, and that person's going to walk with you into City Hall, and they're going to sit with you as you fill this out, and they're going to make sure all of your questions are answered, and then we're going to come back when the time comes to pick it up to make sure that there are no issues, so that you don't get kicked off and can't feed your family. Our Hmong community here is not going to listen to us unless we are where they feel is a trusted place.
Yes.
I made no assumptions about the value of Small Business Development Center services to our Native American tribal leadership because first I needed to make sure that they understood who we were and why we wanted to be of service, and then to see what lead they would take that we could follow.
Mhm.
It's my soapbox. I'll stop now. Tara Lynn, your turn.
Well, can I just say here, agreed. And again, one of the largest takeaways from the Small Business COVID Relief Grant Program is that we can do that. We saw it. We saw it. And there has long been an idea that because entrepreneurs are pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, that they don't need to be coached or walked through things. They're mavericks, right? They're creating new things. They're creating something different. Many people see them as mavericks, not as delicate in any way. And what you just described is a delicateness, right? Someone in need. And I think that when you mention culture, you're talking about a shift in culture, right? In more than one way, right? You're speaking of the culture of the individual, but you're also speaking about the general culture in which we see small business owners. And I think that that's a culture shift that I think we have to work to really make happen in the ecosystem. I will be honest, the first 30 days of the pandemic, I barely left my desk. I'm not sure I showered every day. I ran to the bathroom most of the time, way past when I should have been there. And I did a lot of crying with people on the phone. People who saw what they worked for slipping away from them. That's the delicateness that I hear in the story that you just told. And I think that that sensitivity, we have to train in our counselors. We have to make sure that our material speaks to that. And we have to be careful that and cognizant of meeting our small businesses where they are. Otherwise, we are not providing what they need. And I think it takes all of us to do that. First, awareness of it, and then second, a commitment to do it. And then all of us hold each other accountable for delivering on that. I've been in every shoe. I will close with this. Get off my soapbox for a minute. I've been in every shoe. I've run a small business. I've been an SBDC counselor. I've run a business association. I've run a foundation. I've run an ethnic health organization, second in command there. I've seen small business ownership from every single angle. And I bring that to the position that I have now. And I just am so very fortunate that Governor Newsom is allowing me to have the platform to make the kinds of changes that I think that we need in the ecosystem to bring a higher level of sensitivity and understanding for our small businesses because they deserve it. and because he has mandated that we will have a California for all.
It's a beautiful way to wrap up. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Tara Lynn Gray, Director of the Office of the Small Business Advocate. I want to honor our timing. I also want to note, Frank, you posed a great question here that I'm not going to lose. I'll make sure that it gets circulated, both to Claire and Tara Lynn, and we'll take a stab at it as well, which is the struggle that small business owners have competing on an equal footing with the financing and the taxation benefits that much larger corporations can tap. So you're right, it's a real situation. It is part of the equity package. But more than anything, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to welcoming you in person and showing you our beautiful home one of these days. And I am really grateful for your office's focus on equity, your emphasis on results, and your patience and your commitment to communities like ours, sometimes rural, sometimes out of the way, but still a landscape for innovation. And we hope to entice you back when we've got, well, we plan to have a lot of stuff going on coming through several years. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.